Hello, welcome to ECO-595 Business Research Methods. In this video, we will go over Chapter 4, the business research process, and overview. So basically, in this chapter, we will be looking at the steps that a researcher usually take to conduct business research. Okay. Now, first of all, let's talk about how business research can help business. Typically, business research contributes to decision making. And for the management of a company, they often face uncertainty and they need to make important decisions all the time. There are situations where the management knows things for sure. In those situations, they can make a decision right away. While in other situations, the management needs to weigh a lot of options, and they also need to kind of fight against odds or fight against probability to make decisions. What would be the best way to do certain things? In those situations, business research can help. Okay, so there are basically two broad applications of business research. One is firm seeking potential opportunities. Okay. That is, if a firm is exploring new markets, if the firm is thinking about launching a new product. Or the other application is firms dealing with business problems. Okay, that is, the firm is facing some difficulties in its management. The firm is not doing as well as expected. Then in such situations, the firm may also seek help from business research. Okay, so formally, now since business research contributes to decision making, formally decision making is the process of developing and deciding among alternative ways of resolving a problem or choosing from among alternative opportunities. Okay, so if you think about it, basically, most of the time, the management have several options, and they just need to know which option would serve the best. Now, typically, business research can weigh in and conduct research, conduct data analysis to determine which option will bring the best decision or which option will bring the highest probability of being successful. Now, as I mentioned, there are two basic broad applications of business research in terms of decision making. One is the business opportunity, the other one is business problem. Now, in terms of business opportunity, I want to mention that this is really a very broad application. Okay, the world is always changing, right? Something may not work several years ago, can work today. So business should always scan the environment to determine whether they should explore new markets, whether they should extend their sales to other markets. For example, there are tons of things that China did not have many years ago, and nowadays, right, a lot of companies from the U.S. and the Europe are going to China and have their stores or products sold there, and it's become popular. Actually, the most apparent example would be McDonald's, right? McDonald's nowadays, at least very popular, more popular than any other foreign food in China. Now, probably, I guess another popular one would be food from Korea. That's something I know, at least among my friends, they all eat Korean food all the time. Okay. The textbook gives us a very interesting example. Now think about it. With the technology advance, a lot of things become possible these days. Think about a few years ago. Can you imagine shopping for groceries online? Now you can do it, right? Walmart, Amazon provide the service saying that, yes, you can shop for groceries. Walmart provide this convenience for you and say, look, you shop for groceries online and we get them together. We get it ready for you. You can just drive by Walmart and pick it up. It's very convenient, especially for people who are busy, right? You don't have time to go to every section of the store to shop for the groceries. Then the store will do it for you, right? And you save the time. Well, time is money, right? So another example is the eBay versus garage sale. In the old days, right, if you have some used stuff for sale, you need to set up a garage sale, put the sign on the traffic, through the traffic, and say, well, we have a garage sale on Saturday. It's usually over the weekend, and people will drive to your location to look at your stuff. Well, actually, the origination of eBay was really a big garage sale, because with eBay, you can list what you have. Of course, at the very beginning, that's the used stuff listed on eBay. You can say, I have this used stuff and I'm selling for this price. People all around the nation can see it and they are able to purchase from you. You just mail the stuff to the buyer, right? So eBay actually is an online version of garage sale, which is at a much larger scale, right? Business problem, we have it all the time, right? For example, a store could face some difficulty in terms of consumer confidence. The most apparent example would be Chipotle, right? We all know a few years ago they faced the crisis when the E. coli were found in their food, right? So they faced this challenge of rebuilding the image of the restaurant and attracting customers, keep their current customer and retain their old customers. Okay, that's the business problem. Now sometimes the decision making is not so easy actually for the management, right? You may only observe symptoms instead of the real problem, okay? And these symptoms are the signals of a problem, okay? They are caused by the problem, but you may not be able to see it clearly. And for such situations, research will also be able to help to identify the real cause of the problem. Okay. So what is the research role in decision-making process? Several ways. The first step is, of course, recognize the nature of the problem or the opportunity, right? For the problem, as I mentioned, you may only observe symptoms. Then the research can really dig into the symptom. Researcher will gather information to really decide what is the real problem that is causing these symptoms, okay? And the other one is recognize opportunity, right? That is, well, maybe, let's say, for example, cosmetics. 50 years ago, if you, as a U.S. company, if you are thinking selling cosmetics to China, never mind, don't even think about it. You will fail, because in those days, cosmetics is not even popular, but most likely not acceptable to the majority, okay? Now, as I mentioned, world change, right? Environment change, people's notion change. Everything is changing every day. So nowadays, right, don't just talk about cosmetics. A lot of things are more popular in China. A lot of things from the US are more popular in China than before, right? So there are going to be some points when the cosmetic manufacturers or retailers say, well, let's scam the environment, let's scam the market in China again, try to decide whether it's an opportunity for us or not. So for that case, research can help, because you can conduct research to survey the customers in China to see whether the view of cosmetic has changed or not, whether they're more acceptable cosmetic or not, and whether they are willing to purchase imported cosmetic or not. Okay, so that's how research can help in decision making. And the second is research can help identify how much info is currently available and how reliable it is. Okay, So during the research, you're going to talk to people, gather information, and you will be able to tell how much information is available right now. And the third one is determine what information is needed to better deal with the situation. Well, most of the time when we talk about business research, it involves data analysis. That is, the researcher needs to gather further information based on what's going on right now, analyze the information, and eventually come up with market intelligence, which is basically conclusions from the analysis to help the management to better deal with the situation. So basically, these are the 3 steps a research can help in decision making. All right. So one business research is needed for decision making. Well, it depends actually. If there's certainty, that is, the decision maker has all information needed to make an optimal decision, then business research is not needed. If you know everything, this is where business research can help. That is, the manager has the general information. The manager knows the general nature of these objectives, but the information about alternatives is incomplete. Okay? For example, firm refinancing, right? So suppose this firm A is thinking about refinancing, right? It has several options, and the firm definitely needs to conduct research to determine what is the best way to do the refinance. And if they're thinking about IPOs, what is the price of the IPO? How do they do it? Which way they want to do it? So all of these will require information, will require business research. Now the last situation is ambiguity. All right, this is much more difficult. This is much more difficult because when you have ambiguity, okay, the management may not be clear about what's going on. They may not know their objective. They might not know what decision making they need to make. But business research can still help. Okay. Here's one example. Say that, suppose for a fast food restaurant, okay? Maybe they are experiencing small changes in the sales of an individual item, okay, but there's no change in the overall sales, okay? So such thing, we call the symptom. You observe declined sales of individual items, okay? We call the symptom. Well, the symptom may not point to a problem because you cannot summarize from this drop in sales here and there to say, oh, we have some issue going on. However, okay, when the symptoms develop, when you notice that the overall sales is declining, then this is something more apparent. You definitely need to conduct research to find out what's going on. There could be several reasons. Number one is, look, consumers' taste just changed. Our taste of food changed over time. We maintain a rough, same taste for what type of food we want, but our subtle taste will change, okay? And new food become popular all the time. So as restaurants, you definitely need to keep an eye at what consumers want now these days, right? So maybe the food offered by the restaurant is not catering to what consumers taste. Or maybe there's new competition around. Maybe there's a new fast food restaurant open recently. It could be that your competitors is running a promotion, so consumers are attracted by their promotion. So there's a lot of reasons for this, and business research will be able to help to dig out the real reason. Okay, and the real reason could be several of them. It could be the competition effect. It could be the taste effect. Could be a combination of several reasons. And then once you can find out, or once you can kind of disentangle the reasons causing the decline in sales, you will be able to come up with solutions to help deal with such declines, right? So business research definitely will be able to help you to determine what caused or what have affected your research, your sales, and also can actually rank order the reasons, which one is the most important one, which is the second one. And then once you know the reasons, you will be able to rank order the solutions. You definitely want to deal with number one reason the first. Right? So that's the situation when we have ambiguity. Basically, business research is needed for uncertainty and ambiguity. Right? We typically have three types of the business research: exploratory, descriptive, and causal research. Okay. Actually, these three types of business research represent, in general, three steps of research we conduct to help solve a very complicated, a very big problem. Okay, so let's start with exploratory research. So exploratory research is usually conducted to clarify ambiguous situations or discover ideas that may be potential business opportunities. Okay, this is actually typically the initial research conducted to clarify and define the nature of the problem. At the very beginning, okay, if you only observe your symptoms and you don't observe the real problem, you will need to conduct exploratory research to further define the nature of the problem, to further determine what the real problem is. Okay? You could take this as the pilot research. Typically, such research is followed by either descriptive research or causal research afterwards. So exploratory research is more like a pilot research. Here's a few examples when people would conduct exploratory research. Okay. First one is about Pillsbury Doughboy. Okay. I'm pretty sure you have this image of a, you can probably describe better than me, this white little doughboy acting funny to attract people's attention, right? But it basically never changed. Okay, and the other example would be Brownie Man. Okay, when you probably know this brand for paper towel, right? There's this brand called Brownie, and when we mentioned this, I actually have the image of this man, right? One question would be how old you want this Brownie Man to be, right? And the other is what should a man be named? Okay. Actually, all these three companies have conducted exploratory research to find. I want to take the Brownie Man as an example, okay, which I actually think is kind of funny, because originally they want to design the package for the paper towel, okay. They actually gathered focus group to talk about what the image should be. So first of all, it will be a man, right? So the focus group will be females sitting together to kind of describe what features this man should have and what is the nature, how the man should look like, what would they think to be attractive, okay? So eventually the conclusion is they think a sexy, healthy image of a man would be the most attractive for this paper towel or for this brand. So that's what you've seen now. I forgot to put an image of the Brownie Man, but take a look. See how people's view of sexy have changed over years. I'm almost 100% sure that nobody would agree this image of Brownie now will be regarded as sexy, right? He is everything else but not sexy. At least not to me, right? But in the old days, they conducted exploratory research to find out what people want as the image. That's the first step of research, okay? How about MMs, right? So MMs once wanted to name their characters. So they also conduct this exploratory research and ask people, so what do you want to name this one? What do you want to name that one? But it turns out what they found actually is people just pay more attention to color than the real character. So they've decided, you know what? Let's go with what people want. So they actually gave up the plan to name the characters. Instead, they just use the color blue, yellow, red, etc. Okay. And now, how about Mr. Peanut? I do have an image of him here, right? That's Mr. Peanut. I'm sure it looks very familiar to you. But do you know there was once the company was considering to put Mr. Peanut in Bermuda shorts? They thought some change, some variety may attract more customers, because you always worried that, well, people have been looking at the image for a long time. Maybe they get bored. Maybe we should put some variety. Maybe we should change the image a little bit, right? So they did try Bermuda shorts. And guess what? Why you don't see it nowadays? Because it's not attractive to people. Because after the exploratory research, they found out that's not a good idea. Okay? So that's what exploratory research can help with different companies. The next thing I want to talk about is descriptive research. Now, descriptive research is usually the second step, okay, depending whether you need exploratory research or not. Descriptive research describes characteristics of objects, people, groups, organizations, and environment. So basically, as you can tell, descriptive means you want to describe something. You want to paint a picture. You want to answer who, what, when, where, why, and how questions. Okay? So you want to kind of gather information from all perspectives. Okay? Here's two examples. Now think about it. Organic food, right? We all know that Whole Food Market sell most of its product is organic. So it's famous for organic food. But then where should Whole Food Market open their stores? Then they definitely need to know what type of people would prefer to purchase organic food, and what is the natures, what about their habit, etc. All this information can help Whole Food Markets and other similar stores to better locate their stores. Okay. So according to the survey, actually it turns out that the most frequent buyers of organic food are affluent men and women, which is expected, right? Ages 45 to 54 and ages 18 to 35. Two reasons. If you think about it, typically when you get older, you, in general, especially when you're between 45 and 54, you probably have more money to spend. Either you have children or not. Your children is grown up. You don't need to pay for their food. You don't need to pay a lot of money for their needs, right? So by that age, you have more money to spend for your own, right? And you also care more about the health, because when, if you are younger, trust me, when you get older, you will realize how important health is, right? And at that time, people will pay more attention to health. Now, for the younger group, 18 to 34, this is because organic food is something new, right? And younger people, younger generation, tend to accept new concepts more easily than older generation. This is also related to risk, actually, if you think about it. As we discussed before, it's actually related to age, right? When people get older, they are more risk averse. And same thing, so younger people tend to accept new idea, new stuff, new innovation, things like that. So this is expected. And what else they found? Well, they actually also find that consumers who buy organic food are not brand oriented. Actually, if you ask me, I do buy organic food from time to time, but if you ask me, I cannot name a brand. Actually, most people will pay attention as to whether it is organic or not. The difference is between organic or non-organic. The difference is not between this brand and that brand. What else? They also find that those people tend to live in coastal cities with large population, actual population over 500,000, and most of them are in the West Coast. This is also related to, I guess, people's perception about the environment. Like in general, because I do research in environmental economics, in general, West Coast is relatively more environmental friendly than people in inland, right? Actually, when I first looked for a job, I know my major is economics, and I looked at research in environmental economics. And then I find my first job in Texas. So my colleagues and my friends were joking with me, wow, you find the perfect location for your research. I said, yes, of course, I can contribute a lot there. Anyway, but in general, nowadays, people pay more and more attention to the environment, right? I believe many of you recycle, right? That's really one way to contribute to the environment. The other example is about online MBA, as what you are doing right now, right? You are taking an online MBA program. Now, what if a university is considering to launch online MBA program? Well, the university definitely needs research, which it is good with, right? The university is really good with research. They have a lot of researchers. So for the online MBA program, the university definitely needs to know what type of students they would attract and how these students will behave, right? And what are other things they could know about such students. So research has found out that online MBA students tend to be older than the traditional one. The average age is 30 years old. For certain reasons, right? When you talk about online MBA, the first thing comes to my mind is it is convenient. So we would expect a lot of people take online MBA while working full-time, just like many of you are doing right now. The other thing they found out is the online MBA students tend to live in rural communities. Yes, because it's convenient. You don't need to drive a long way to go to the university. And they tend to be more introverted. I have a say about this. I think that is true maybe at the very beginning of this online program offering, but nowadays it's a mix. At least according to my interaction with my students, my online MBA students, I think that's really not the way. There's a mix. However, I do think this applies to myself. I can remember when I was in graduate school, I prefer to take online courses to in-class courses because I know myself is more introverted, which is kind of ironic. I know I'm teaching in university. I need to talk pretty much all the time. I need to talk to students, talk to colleagues. I need to teach classes, but by nature, I'm introverted. If I have a choice, I'd rather stay at home, not talking to anybody, including my family. I just need some time for myself to, if I could avoid talking, that would be the best thing I want to do. So anyway, and they also find, as expected, online MBA students have a much heavier workload, right? And the other thing they find out is MBA students have a higher drop-off rate. Actually, about 14 of the online students drop the course before it's finished. Now, in comparison, in the traditional class, the average is only 7.2%. And this is also kind of expected because for the online course, sometimes people may not know whether it would work out for him or her or not, right? You have a very busy schedule, you sign up for an online course, it turns out there's too many conflicts, then you have to drop the course, which is really understandable. Okay. So just within descriptive research, there's one thing called diagnostic analysis. Okay. For the diagnostic analysis, This is related to something like maybe, say for example, you want to find out the difference between you and the competitor to know why you are not doing so well, or you want to know how you can be the leader in the market. Okay. Then you would need diagnostic analysis. So the last level, the highest level, would be causal research. This is the most powerful, and also the most expensive research one can conduct. So what is causal research? Well, causal research is conducted to identify cause and effect relationship. That is, you can declare one is causing the other. Now, trust me, that is not an easy thing to do, okay? In our daily life, most of the time, people will easily say, oh, A is causing B, right? You going to school is causing the family bankruptcy. I'm giving a ridiculous example. But in reality, that is not so easy to establish if you think about it, okay? So typically, causal research, in my opinion, is not an easy one. And actually, there are techniques described in this textbook which I don't believe should be labeled as causal research. However, let's just look at a few things that will kind of allow us to incline to say this is causal, okay? So there are several evidence. The first one is temporal sequence. That is, if you declare causal effect, now the cause must happen before the results, then we will say one is causing the other, right? If you observe change in the stock price, and before that, the CEO of the company changed, you might say the change of the CEO is causing the stock price to change. I said you might say this is because you cannot say it for sure. What if there's something else going on, right? So you might say at least the change of the CEO is before the change of the price. The second necessary, I would call this necessary condition, is concomitant variation. That is, the two phenomena vary together, okay? So you would observe when one factor changes, the other factor will change with it, either towards the same direction or towards the opposite direction. But whenever one changes, the other must change with it. The other must follow. If one is changing but the other is not changing, then you definitely cannot declare causality. Okay. The last one is the most difficult condition one can satisfy. This is non-spurious association. Okay, that is, you must make sure there's an absence of alternative plausible explanations. Let me show you an example to tell you what we mean by that. Okay, look at this one. Actually, there are data that suggest there's correlation between ice cream sales and murders. Okay, it turns out when ice cream sales is increasing, okay, the number of murders also increases. Okay, but can you declare one is causing the other? When you can you declare more ice cream sales is causing more murders? If that's the case, then you should definitely ban the sale of ice cream. It's causing more murders. This is the situation where we would see spurious correlations. That is, there's a third factor that's causing both, but the third factor is kind of hiding behind. So what you observe are the two results of the third factor. And the third factor is the temperature. Think about it. When temperature is high, ice cream sales will definitely go up. Okay? And at the same time, actually, high temperature can also cause more murders. And this could be because when temperature is high, people are more active and more likely to commit a violent crime. And when the temperature is high, we tend to be more anxious and easier to be upset, easier to be irritated. So actually, in this case, we do find a third factor. In statistics, we call it the confounding factor. So let me type out the term. We call it confounding factor. Okay. The confounding factor could be sometimes really subtle and hiding behind, but it's there. So the confounding factor usually is the reason when sometimes people say there's causality, but actually there's not. And we should be very careful with such situations. Okay. Now, just because causality is very difficult to establish, typically we would rely on experiment to declare causality. So actually, in my opinion, okay, it's very hard for you to establish causality unless, number one, you have a theory to back it up. Number two, you conduct experiments. Okay, the reason is when you conduct experiments, you have control of the factors. You can get rid of the confounding factors. Okay, you can say, I'm gonna hold the confounding factors the same. So that way you will get rid of the confounding factor. Okay? So experiment is a carefully controlled study in which the researcher manipulates a proposed cause and observes any corresponding change in the proposed effect. That is, you could manipulate the cause. You could control everything else to be the same, just change the cause to see if there's any effect. If there is, you would say, oh, this is the cause. Otherwise, if you cannot control all other factors, then you are potentially including confounding factors. Okay? Now, test market is usually considered as experiment is actually used a lot because in test market, you could control to a certain extent the environment, the market. And for example, McDonald's actually is quite famous for its use of test market as one of the companies. So at one point, recall, I guess it's 5-10 years ago, we started having Wi-Fi in those restaurants, in fast restaurants, in a lot of locations. And Starbucks is among one of them, then McDonald's, and the other one is, I'm trying to, oh, I gave up. So anyway, if you think about it, when a certain store is willing to provide Wi-Fi access, they would face many different supply, carriers or providers. Like different companies can provide Wi-Fi access to the store, and the store will need to pick which one serves the purpose best. So McDonald's actually conducted experiments to determine which provider serves the purpose best. They actually selected 3 different rival Wi-Fi service providers, okay? And they use these 3 different services in different locations, okay? And then they analyze the cost, they analyze the service, they also ask consumer feedback to better determine which one they want to use as their main Wi-Fi provider. Okay? So that is a market experiment. The other thing is, think about it, when you have a new package of a product, when you have a new product, you may want to test the market. You may want to sell the product in a few selected locations to see whether it will be popular or not. That is also experiment. Okay. Here's another example. Say, for example, a store is considering what price they should sell for this Wii box, which is a not that Wii, but it's also a video game console. Let's say it's Wii box, and what they are considering is from what channel they want to distribute the product and what price they want to use. So they could set up an experiment like this. They could select several locations, use different distribution channel, and set different prices. This is a controlled experiment because you definitely varies the cost, which are the price and the distribution channel, to see the results, which way will give you the best sale. Okay, so this is another example of the experiment. Now finally, let's talk about the stages in research process. There are 6 steps, but I need to mention that these steps are not really clear, have a clear borderline that says, oh, now you finish number 1, you go to number 2. Sometimes these steps can overlapping with each other. And there are situations, actually, this is not a one-shot game, I'll say. Actually, there are times the researcher will go through the stages round by round, okay? This is because when you conduct research, when you finish, you got the conclusion, you may find, oh, this is new knowledge. Now I need to conduct another round of research. So these steps are just rough steps that people typically follow when conduct business research. The first one is to define the research objectives. Actually, we're going to devote a whole chapter talking about research objectives, which is the next chapter, chapter 6. So I'm going to delay discussion of this step for that until that chapter, but let me emphasize that this is the most important step in business research. It will lay out the foundation of everything. It will determine the direction, effectiveness, and result of the research. Okay, so it's a very serious, important step. But the first step is, overall, you want to know what you want to solve. Okay, what question you need to answer, what decision making you're trying to help, what kind of conclusion you want. That's the first step. Now, the second step is to plan a research design. Yes, when you conduct research, you need to design it, just like you need to design experiments, right? In chemistry and physics, when you need to run experiments, you design it first, then you carry out. Same for research. You also need to design. In particular, you need to determine how you're going to conduct research, what method you want to use, how you collect data, what method you use to analyze the data, etc. Then, once you have the design set up, you can now talk about the sample. You need to collect data, so you need to plan a sample. Typically, we would have this assumption saying that, look, you are interested in a large group of people or objects, and you can't survey all of them, so you have to take a sample. The next step, naturally, will be collecting the data and then analyze the data. Typically, analyzing the data involves statistics. Lastly, after the analysis, you will be able to come out with the conclusion, and you do need to report your findings. You could either prepare a written report, or you would be asked to present a result in the presentation. Okay. As I said, we're going to defer the discussion of research objective for later, but emphasize again, this is very important. Let's see. For the exploratory research techniques, I want to mention that there's typically pilot study for the exploratory research. Okay. Typically, you don't want to run a large scale of research before you have a better idea about what's going on. So that's why typically we conduct exploratory research. And for exploratory research, we would launch pilot study, collect data from a small group of respondents, conduct focus group interviews, ask a focus group of people. That's for the exploratory research. Right? So in terms of the research design, basically, as I mentioned, one thing you need to determine is how you're going to collect the data. Okay? There are several ways. Okay? One is you could use surveys. this is actually the most common one. And I could imagine that many of you would use survey to collect data. We will discuss about survey in several chapters that's coming up soon. Okay, so again, I'm going to defer the discussion for later. The next one is experiment. Just as we talked about, you could conduct controlled experiment. You could also test the market. The third option is use secondary data. That is data already collected by others or by commercial companies. We mentioned several companies that provide commercial data already, right? And the last one is by observation. Okay? Sometimes, actually, people would think, oh, survey is naturally the best one. But not really. Actually, research design improves as people get more experience. At the very beginning, a researcher would tend to use survey all the time because that's direct, that's cost efficient, and that's the most easy one to do because you have control of what you ask, what information you gather, etc. However, let me give you a very unique example. This is about also collecting data, conducting research. So let's see. I just need to find the name of the museum that I want to mention. Oh, it's Chicago's Museum of Science. So at one point, Chicago's Museum of Science wanted to know the relative popularity of its exhibits. So they want to know which room is the most popular one, which exhibit is the most popular one. Well, for, I guess, a junior researcher, the natural thinking would be, oh, let me survey the customers. Let me send out surveys to visitors. Or let me send out surveys to visitors and non-visitors, the potential visitors. Okay? Well, sure, that way you would be able to find which exhibit is the most popular one. Actually, an experienced researcher suggested that instead of using survey, you could do observation. So what the researcher suggested is that the museum keep track of the frequency with which the floor tiles in front of the exhibit has to be replaced. Now think about it. That's actually a very clever idea, right? The exhibit that visits the most will have the most use of the tiles. So you will have to replace the tile very frequently because of the high frequency of visits, right? So that way, instead of spending money to collect survey, design survey, etc., you could do this by observation, and this costs even much less. Okay. So again, this design actually develops or improves with experience. So it is something we just need to, I guess, learn by doing to improve. All right. Once we know how we can collect data, we will need to determine how we sample the whole population. That is, who we want to survey, right? And how many people want to survey. For all these questions, we also have a chapter devoted to it. So I'm going to wait until that chapter to talk about how we sample populations. And I just want to mention one thing, that is sampling actually is also very important step that will determine the quality of your data, that will be able to determine whether the data you collected will be representative of the whole population, and will also determine whether the conclusion you draw is correct or not. So sampling is also a very important step. Okay. The next step, gathering data. Okay. And processing and analyzing data requires the understanding of statistics, the tools to analyze the data. So you're going to take another course that is focusing on exclusively statistics, business statistics. So in our course, we will not be able to cover much of it. Towards the end of the semester, we will be talking about a few most popular tools to show you how statistics can help with business research. And actually, statistics is used in business research all the time. Whenever you have data, whenever you want to analyze data, you're going to need to use statistics. Okay? So my suggestion, develop some love for statistics from now on. All right. So the final step is usually, of course, after the analysis, you will have a conclusion. You draw the conclusions and prepare a report. Instead of asking you to carry out the research prospectus you write, I actually would ask you to practice presenting results in a different way. That's why you have the short paper presentation requirement. All right. So that's all about this chapter. We just went over the steps in the business research process and talk about a few steps in more details. All right. So that's all I have to say about this chapter. I'll see you next time.